Hi there, it's Joe the CRM chap here with another video in my series all about Microsoft Exam MB400. This is the developer's exam for those who are building or extending solutions on top of Dynamics 365 Online or the Power Platform. So we're in our final video now where we're focusing on the Web API, Dynamics 365 Web API. So far we've seen in some of the previous videos, which I'll link below, how to authenticate into the Web API, how to work with Discovery URL, and then finally how to work with entity metadata. We're going to round things off today and focus and look at batch operations. So these are a really great feature that let you execute a number of potentially related operations as part of a single request. So typically whenever you're doing any sort of complex transactions that are targeting a database, you want to try and keep it as atomic as possible. And what do I mean by that? I mean you want to make sure that all of the operations either succeed or fail in unison. Because potentially if you're updating multiple tables, you could end up leaving the database in a particularly bad state. So by using batch operations, we can ensure that our transactions remain atomic. We can ensure that everything executes successfully, or if that doesn't occur, we can roll back the entire transaction, return us to where we were before. So as we can see, we're in the Postman application at the moment, so we're going to use this to basically build out a batch request that's going to create a couple of task records on an existing account record in the system. So if we were to navigate down into our where's it gone? Into our Dynamics 365 systems. So we're in our MB400 instance in the model-driven app that's been built out earlier in the series, and we've got a single account record in there. At the moment, as we can see, it's got no tasks on there. We're hopefully going to change that and add a couple of tasks onto there that will appear when the batch operation executes. So back in Postman then, first thing we need to do is just adjust our URL. We just want to add a $batch to the end of it. If we were to run this now, we're just going to get an error. First of all, it's going to tell us that our content type has not been set correctly in our header. So let's go and fix that right now. So we click on headers down here. We type in as our key content type. And then we want to make sure that it's specifically a multi-part mixed content type, but also we need to establish a boundary with a unique batch number. So this can be basically any number that you want. In this case, we're just using something fairly generic, but you must make sure that it's a multi-part mixed content type and that you include a boundary with a batch number like that as part of your request. So again, if we were to run this now, it's not going to do anything at all. We're just going to get a response back saying, okay, yep, I received the request, but there's nothing in it. So what do you expect me to return type thing. So now we can start to actually build out the actual request that gets fired against, or the multiple requests that get fired against the instance. So to do that, we go to body over here. We make sure we've got raw selected. And what we're going to do here, I'm going to sort of cheat a little bit. We're going to copy and paste across each sort of portion of the request, but we're going to talk about each one in detail so that you can hopefully get a flavour in terms of what each one's doing. So first of all, we need to basically establish, add in a designation to indicate, okay, here is the start of our batch request. So we do this like so, -- batch, and then with the appropriate number on it. And again, so this effectively starts off the batch. At the end of the request, we then would have a corresponding sort of tag at the end to indicate the end of the batch, and we do that by again doing -- with -- at the end of it. So effectively everything that executes within this sort of window here is considered a single batch. Okay. So next, underneath our batch, the start of our batch, we then again indicate the content type for the request. So it's going to be multi-part mixed again. And here we want to indicate, okay, so we've defined our batch, but now we're defining our change set, the operations that execute in unison. And again, we just give it just sort of a designation, an ID value, a fairly generic one in this case. And at this point, this then effectively indicates what the change set name will be. Next, from here, we can start building out our individual requests that get fired on. And like before, we with the batches, we indicate, okay, this is the start of our change set using the ID number that we specified already. We need to attach on some header values that go as part of the request. So in this case, it will be a content type, application HTTP, binary encoding, and then we can also tag on an ID as well, which will then indicate, okay, this is operation number 1, this is operation number 2, etc, etc, etc. Next, we can then build out the actual request that gets fired onto the endpoint. So in this case, we're going to be doing a post request. Using the URL that we've got defined above, we must specify this in full, and we're going to hit the task endpoint. So we're going to effectively post and create a new task. And again, content type is set as application JSON type entry, so make sure that's always set. And then we can then just pop in the raw JSON for what we're going to be creating. So in this case, we're going to create a task with subject task1 in batch, and we're going to associate this task to our specific account record. And we do this by specifying the full URL and then the ID of the account record that we saw a few minutes ago. Okay, so with that there, we've got our first change in our change set request built out. Now we can build out the second one, and this one's going to do pretty much the same as what we've seen just now. It's going to create a second task. So in which case, I'm just going to copy and paste all of this down here. And again, this is fairly similar to what we've just seen a second ago. The only difference is we've got 2 on there, task 2 in batch as well. Other than that, it's virtually the same request-wise. Then finally, so at this point we've got a closing tag here to indicate the end of our change set request. So all of these will execute as part of the same transaction effectively. If one fails, the whole thing will be rolled back. As a final step, what we want to do is basically just return the details about the account tasks that have been created, just to confirm that it's been created successfully, and we can get details from that, such as the ID or any other property that we want. So in which case then, after the end of our change set request, we define on a get request that's as part of the same batch. It's a get request we can't typically include as part of a change set request, because a get is just retrieving data, it's not actually changing anything in the system, so therefore it's not a transaction which we can effectively roll back or change in any way. So again, content type is the same as what we've seen above when we initiate the change set, application HTTP and binary encoding, and then we just do a get. We just get in the accounts, and we just want to select all of the tasks, the subject name of all the tasks that have just been created. So at this point then, our batch request is ready to go. So what we can do is press the send button, and we can see we get a bit more detail back this particular time. So for each request we effectively get details or confirmation whether each one is fired or not. So for example, for our task creations, for both of those we get a HTTP 204, which indicates that the task has been created successfully. Then right at the bottom we can see we get a 200 OK, and then our response back to indicate, okay, yeah, there's our task in there. And we can verify that this has worked by jumping back into Dynamics 365, do a quick refresh of our accounts record, and we can see we've got 2 tasks in there, which is really great. Now, to sort of demonstrate, the atomicity of change set requests, what we can do now, okay, we can run the request again, but we're just going to make a slight change. So we're just going to change the ID to something that's not valid in the system, to an ID that doesn't exist. So just by adding an atom like so. So now when I execute this request, we get some slightly different behavior. We can see that it's failed. Specifically, it's failed on the content ID 2 portion of the request, and we get a full error message down here that indicates, okay, the account doesn't exist, so therefore I've not been able to complete the request. Now, instead of there just being the one task record in the system, because presumably this would have completed successfully this portion of the request, if we were to go into the system now and refresh again, we should see we've only got the 2 tasks created earlier. So none of the changes that we've attempted to make have actually been applied in the system. The whole transaction has been rolled back, and we're back to the state that we were before. So really, when we're trying to make sure, when we've got, potentially complex operations targeting Dynamics 365, we want to create multiple records as part of the same request, change sets and batch requests give you some really nice capabilities on there to execute all manner of different operations that either sort of succeed in unison or fail entirely and return you back to sort of square one. So that pretty much wraps it up for change set requests and also the Web API in general. So I hope that this video and the other ones on both Web API and an NB 400 generally have been really useful. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like the content. It'd be great to have you along for the ride. All it leaves me to say is have a great day ahead. Thank you.